I think it's the same today. You've got to deliver on that promise. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver. So we have to be careful about that, and you've got to really manage the experience, manage the guest experience, and making sure the story we're telling publicly about the guest experience is true, and two, that we can live up to it.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Well, I'm going to wind up for this one. It's fantastic. And you?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Good.
Question.
Yes.
Have you ever milked a cow?
Ooh. I feel like I may have when I was really young because my grandfather had a farm, and I feel like that might be something I have done. Have you?
I have not. And if I did, I would remember it. I guess unless I was a very small child, to which I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But the reason I ask is, and it does tie in with our interview today with Doug Stagner, but that he actually shares with us that many children these days, have never done that, which is okay, but also feel so disconnected from the process that they don't even realize that that's how it's done. Like they'll see a carton of milk at the grocery store and think that's how it comes, just like a bottle of soda.
Exactly. Doug Stagner is the new president of Grant's Farm in St. Louis. And part of his mission in taking over is really to help tell the story of kind of the farm, right? The family farm. Where do all these things come from? And he talks about doing it not in a way of telling the story, but showing people. So, maybe in the future, allowing people to pick the eggs out of the chicken coop, or to actually to milk the cow. And I think what's so fascinating about that is that it's not your typical sort of theme park or museum hands-on activity. This is with live creatures, live animals, and, really showing where food comes from, which, how much more, basic and foundational does it get, to your existence as a human being?
It's a pretty important thing to exist, and also for us to know and understand it. Prior to Grant's Farm, Doug has a phenomenal career within the attractions industry, spent many years with SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, going back to San Diego, San Antonio, and working for corporate in so many positions. I want to say too many to list out right here as part of this intro. But he was able to bring all of that with him in the time that he was with SeaWorld, overseeing operations, but also working in an animal-based attraction, and then bringing that to Grant's Farm, which he refers to as being a 67-year-old startup. And it's cool to hear him talk about how there's heritage and there's the legacy of the farm. But Anheuser-Busch, who has operated it for many years, is transitioning out. So it allows them to be kind of have that scrappier mentality of a new type of attraction and a new business.
You know how we sometimes nerd out on coasters and attractions and things of that nature? This one felt like we got to nerd out on operations. Right, just from a peel back the onion, look behind the scenes at how parks operate, and really get into the mind of someone who's been doing it for a long time, doing it at a high level for a long time. And so I can't wait for people to hear his insights and to understand what it takes to not only run a big SeaWorld operation, but even a smaller facility like Grant's Farm. A lot of the concepts are the same.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't normally have a thread line through multiple episodes on the Attraction Pros podcast. But if you've listened to our previous episode with Scott Rose from Zoo Tampa at Lowry Park, Scott and Doug used to work very closely with each other when they were both at SeaWorld. And we actually get to hear a little bit about how they work together to tear down some of those silos between marketing and operations. So we revisit that topic in this episode, and we hear it from Doug's standpoint on the operations side, where we were able to hear it from Scott's side with the marketing angle. And I think unless we have any more to talk about it, I'd say let's get right to this interview.
Let's do it. Here we go. Doug Stagner, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. How are you doing today, Doug?
I'm doing fantastic, Matt. Thank you so much for having me on. Hello, Josh. Great to be with you guys today. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. We appreciate your time. Doug, can you give us kind of an overview of your career in the industry?
Yeah, so I've been in the attraction business for 37 years now. Started as a summer job to literally pay for tuition and books in college. And that summer job lasted 32 summers. Started out at SeaWorld San Diego, hired for spring break to sweep the park and empty trash cans, and never thought I'd fall in love with that. I did not that particular duty, but made a lot of good friends. And when I graduated college, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And they were in process of opening SeaWorld of Texas at the time in 1988. So I went out there and was on the opening team there for a year and a half, and then really been fortunate. I think a successful career in any industry is, of course, hard work and preparation, but also a little bit of luck of being in the right place at the right time. And that's benefited me over the years. And I worked in San Antonio, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. I worked at corporate for SeaWorld. I worked on international for a while. I a longtime volunteer with IAPA, over 20 years as a volunteer member, like you, Matt, in IAPA. And now find myself in a unique opportunity here at Grants Farm in St. Louis, where the family, after 67 years, Anheuser-Busch has had the operating agreement management contract for Grants Farm, and the family is going to be taking over the day-to-day operation. We're still very fortunate that our partners and friends at Anheuser-Busch will remain as a premier sponsor, but we're kind of taking over the operation, and we're a 67-year-old startup because on the family side we don't have a lot of infrastructure. That was all provided by Anheuser-Busch. So I've been focusing on making sure we can keep the lights on and people paid in a successful transition. But the great thing is the family's committed to Grants Farm. It's an iconic St. Louis attraction. If you ever haven't had the opportunity to visit, back in 1954, Gussie Busch wanted to open the grounds of the family estate and the animal collection that he had to the public. And that's really how it all started. And today's ownership group really wants to make sure that Grants Farm is around for another 50 years for future generations to enjoy. So that's kind of my task at hand.
So as we bridge your career here from SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment to Grants Farm, the one main tie-in, of course, is Anheuser-Busch. So are you finding that there are a lot of similarities perhaps in the operating model or operating style or business structure overall that you were familiar with when much of your time with SeaWorld was under Anheuser-Busch as well?
Yeah, so about 20 years of my career was working for Anheuser-Busch as part of Busch Entertainment. And I definitely think it's helped coming into this job to understand Anheuser-Busch and to understand the history and tradition of the family, and knowing the corporation, but also understanding the family and what their goals are. I think that's made it a little bit easier for me coming into this job, for sure.
Doug, I want to go back just a little bit because you said that, you started off sweeping the park, cleaning up, didn't expect to fall in love with it. In fact, just before we started recording, you said you were a criminal justice major in college. So how did you switch from criminal justice to running theme parks?
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, I grew up and wanted to be a firefighter or a policeman, really had an interest in law enforcement. And when I started at San Diego State, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to major in. Had an interest in business, but the business program was impacted, and it was you were looking at 5 or 6 years to be able to graduate just because the classes weren't there. And I said, well, you know what, criminal justice is interesting. Let me try that. And I got my bachelor's in criminal justice, and was able to get my kind of interest in that during a part of my career. I became a reserve police officer for the city of San Diego for 7 years, and volunteered my time working patrol and events for them, and so enjoyed that. So glad I did that, but have loved my my time and career in the attractions industry.
Yeah.
Are there any lessons, maybe in either direction, so back and forth, that you were able to take from one of those experiences, perhaps as being an officer, that you were able to then bring back into the attraction space, or vice versa from your wealth of experience in attractions? Was there anything you were able to weave into your duties in law enforcement?
Well, listen, we're in the people business, right? Whether you're in law enforcement or an attractions business, two different settings, right? People are coming in the attractions business, showing up your door because they want to be there. When the police are showing up the door, unless you call them, typically people aren't interested. But it's about the human side and human interaction. And I think what really struck me over my career is it's all about that guest or visitor connection, interaction. Look, the goal for all of us in this business is really to come up with a relevant or compelling concept or product that will coax people out of their homes or out of their daily routines and want to come and have a shared experience. Attractions business is very much, about enjoying with friends and family. And so whether it's Grants Farm, SeaWorld, or my work in China, it's about bringing people together with a compelling experience they can share and create memories for a lifetime.
So Doug, can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe the compare and contrast of working in China versus here in the States. What sort of things did you see that were different, and what were some of the things that were the same?
Sure. Well, spent quite a bit of time prior to taking on the role here at Grants Farm in China, kind of pre-pandemic. I was spending 2 to 3 weeks a month in traveling in China. And, you have the obvious language differences, cultural differences. But what struck me is there's a lot more in common amongst all of us in the world than there really are differences. And particularly today, the Chinese youth are growing up very sophisticated and very educated. Yes, they don't have Facebook, Instagram, or Amazon, but they do have a program called WeChat, which is highly popular in China, which is basically all those things in one. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's Venmo, it's Amazon, it's all of it. And this map probably was 5 years ago. What struck me over in China, I was encountering young Chinese people who didn't use cash at all. So 5 years ago, pre-COVID, pre all of that, were literally using their mobile device for every aspect of their life. So they were ahead of us in some respects there. I think, people hear about the size and scale of China, but until you're over and experiencing it, and they consider a small city has only 10 million people in it. That's the other thing that struck me, is just the size and scale of China.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. One of the things you mentioned a few minutes ago too about the farm is that it's like a 67-year-old startup. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like, of having a lot of infrastructure in place, but also at the same time, wanting to act like that kind of scrappy young company with a bold vision for the future?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't understand is Anheuser-Busch has had the management contract. Some people thought, oh, Anheuser-Busch owned the farm. It's always been part of the family. And this is a unique opportunity. The Anheuser-Busch team has done a great job with Grants Farm. Really, they deliver on a quality experience. But when you're managing something versus owning it, there's a different perspective, maybe, different business side to it. And with the family being all in, they're really committed to growing the business. So that idea of being a startup, and yes, we've been around for 67 years, but the sky's the limit for us going forward. The family's committed to invest their own money in this for the purpose of generating additional revenue and attendance that can be put back into Grants Farm. It's really about sustainability. And they're extremely supportive with a lot of ideas I have about the future. So it is exciting, Josh, because we've been around a long time, but we're looking at the next 67 years with just as much enthusiasm as the first.
Yeah, and at Grants Farm, you're back to working with animals, right? And certainly that
Yes.
happens at SeaWorld. So what are some of those lessons that you can take from your time with SeaWorld and working with animals and the people that work with animals and now apply that at Grants Farm?
Yeah, so the thing about the animals, you know, I always love is even the 32 years I worked at SeaWorld, I could still, like on day one, as much as my last day, go to see an animal show and get goosebumps. It never gets old. People that you encounter that care for the animals, I've never witnessed such amazing dedication. Again, whether it's Grants Farm, your local zoo, SeaWorld, wherever, it's just inspiring how committed these folks are. And there's just a human interest, right? And something about being able to see animals up close. We were talking here at the farm. There was a study done, and I forget what inner city it was, but that kids today felt that milk comes from the container in the grocery store, just like soda does. And so we're talking about this idea about how we really remind people that farm and farm life is where we all started, and teach them about that as well. But again, having a great experience as a group or a family as well.
Yeah.
During your time with SeaWorld and working with animals or an animal-based theme park, there definitely has been substantial evolution in public perception of having animals under professional care. And curious as far as your insights from the inside of knowing what happens behind the scenes, in front of the scenes on a daily basis, and the passion that people have for it who are caring for animals. What has that been like for you of being able to see the shift in consumer demand, consumer preferences, or overall sentiment, while that might not necessarily align with the actual reality of the circumstance?
Yeah, and I think it's just that, Josh. It's perception versus reality, and I can tell you, you know, every business evolves. You know, if you look back to circuses in the 50s and such, that they're not the circuses of today. And the passion for the animals occurs both front of house and back of house. And I definitely, one of the things we learned at SeaWorld was people didn't know how much effort went into rescue and rehabilitation. And so that was a story that wasn't really being told, that I think they're doing a great job now. Same thing here, letting people behind the scenes. One of our most popular features at Grants Farm is an animal encounter behind the scenes tour, or going behind the scenes down with the Clydesdales. So I think it's about just being open and showing people how much you care and how much you love for animals, and that appreciation. And I think people get it.
Doug, a minute ago, you were talking about the milk story, and certainly milk comes from a farm, but that's not, again, you know, public or, you know, perceived knowledge for everybody. So how do you tell that story? Like, it's one thing to say, here's a cow, this is where milk comes from, but, you know, doing it in an engaging way, like you said, engaging the whole family at Grants Farm. So what are some of those things that you guys are talking about or thinking about to help tell that story to your guests?
I think better than tell, it's show, and the best way is doing. So we've got some great Jersey cows here, and we talk about next year having keeper talks and demonstrations. How about letting kids milk a cow? That, to your point, Matt, and I know to some people that seems rather basic, but to others it's probably a total foreign concept. Letting kids gather eggs from the chicken coop in the morning that we actually use in our restaurants here and actually sell to the guest. So we've talked about sustainable farming and just that idea. We started a bee colony last year here at the farm that's starting to produce honey. So probably along the same lines that honey doesn't come just from a jar in the grocery store. Let's talk about that process and see it in action here at Grants Farm.
Yeah.
So one of the things too, as you're stepping into this role and being with a 67-year-old startup and these shifts here, what are some of the ways that you're able to really balance the needs of creating profit and running a successful business while at the same time maintaining the strong legacy of the farm itself too?
There is a tremendous amount of interest in the legacy of Grants Farm and the history of the Busch family. One of the things coming in here, the family estate has always been separate and obviously wasn't managed by Anheuser-Busch, and family members have lived at the estate over. Nobody lives there full time right now. But I remember the first time I took the tram ride through the deer park, and they mentioned, oh, off in the distance is the Busch family estate, and people are craning their necks and looking and trying to get just a glimpse. Well, one of the things that we're going to do is trim the trees so you can actually see the estate. The family realizes there's interest in that, and we want to figure out how to appropriately be able to expose people to the history and to see the estate. It's a magnificent building. We'll never have a line of tours through there every day, but we will come up with opportunities for people being able to learn more about the family and the history.
So Doug, as Josh has said, you're moving into this role, taking over as president of Grants Farm, and so you've got to oversee everything. And one of our previous interviews, actually last week, was with Scott Rose, who you worked with at SeaWorld, and we asked him about the relationship between operations and marketing specifically, because we just got into that conversation, and wondering now if you can talk a little bit about, first of all, that relationship, because you came up through operations.
Yes.
And now you're overseeing everything. So is there a different perspective now, or is there a different story to be told?
Well, I think it's the importance, and how I got to know Scott so well. He was the director of advertising, and I was actually running the gate in California. And there was a little bit of butting heads about, operations saying, I don't understand this promotion they're doing or what's going on. And not Scott, but I had a separate marketing leader tell me at one point in my career, yeah, marketing spends all this money on these promotions to get people to the gate, and then you ops people screw it up. And really what you're saying is we've got to work together. And actually with Scott, we started having weekly meetings between operations and marketing, which was unheard of at the time, and really formed a partnership and making sure that we absolutely could deliver on the promise that marketing and advertising were making, and then also provide feedback to them about what the guest was saying about those promotions or advertising. So, and I think it's the same today. You've got to deliver on that promise. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver. So we have to be careful about that, and you've got to really manage the experience, manage the guest experience, and making sure the story we're telling publicly about the guest experience is true, and two, that we can live up to it.
So the phrase underpromise and overdeliver, I've always been really fascinated from this phrase, but really from the standpoint of really linking marketing and operations. And it's kind of a challenge for both, because obviously the goals of marketing are, of course, to get people in, which if there isn't that communication, then it's an overpromise that is then underdelivered. Or if it's too operations heavy, then it's underpromised and it's over-delivered, but it might be for fewer people who may not have been as well excited. So how do you both underpromise and over-deliver, but not underpromise to the standpoint of actually losing out on possible business who should be getting excited about coming to the farm?
So great point, Josh. It's a very fine line. And I can tell you, at least personally, speaking from experience, I didn't always get it right. And you want to make sure you don't go too far either way. To your point is under promising so much that we're not delivering on the business plan side versus, we used to have a saying about peaking the peaks. Oh, July 4th is great. Well, let's do this, this extra promotion. Well, let's look and say, maybe we don't need to peak the peaks. Maybe we got to grow the business in other areas. And I think that's been a focus as well. So it is a very fine line, but the old saying, you got to fish where the fish are. If everybody wants to come on July 4th, well, then you got to figure out a way how to handle it.
Why do you think there has been historically such a divide between operations and marketing?
I don't think you can pin it on anything other than just people being focused and wanting to be the best they can at their job, and realize that, it's shared success, shared failure, and really working together. It's the old adage about breaking down silos. And especially when you work in the attractions world, right? If you're an operator out in the attraction, well, yes, I know there's some people who work in the admin building, but I don't know really what they do and what their job is. So you've got to be in it together. And that's what's fortunate here at Grants Farm. We have a small core leadership team. So marketing, operations, culinary, zoological, we all work together. Everybody pulls duty shifts. Just hired a finance guy who came from the finance world. And I said, hey, by the way, this job, not every weekend, but you're going to be working some weekends and evenings and holidays, because you need to be out there and see and experience what our guests are seeing and experiencing it.
What's the reason for that, or why is it so important for back of house or administrative staff to be able to really immerse themselves in everything that's happening front of house?
I think it's the only way they can truly be successful at their job. You've got to be able to understand what you do in that back office and how it affects the guest experience up front. All of our job is to support the guest experience. And over my career, I've always told people, look, you don't work for me. We all work for the company or the place. And I viewed my job as a leader to give people the tools and resources they need to get the job done. And I think that's just central. I think another point, Josh, is you have to be able to, whether you're front of house or back of house, is to be able to take the guest or the visitor or the customer experience. And we live it day to day and are so deep into it. It's not easy to do. But in fact, I just did it this weekend. I was out riding my bike. And so I just rode up to the attraction as a guest and stopped and looked at the sign, and did it make sense? And did I know where I was supposed to go? I'm one of those who asks a lot of questions. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I feel like together we can come up with the right solutions.
I want to ask you a little bit about, going up to the front entrance and, seeing the signs. Is it tough sometimes to pull yourself out of I know what that sign's supposed to mean or supposed to say, but what is the actual impact?
Yeah. And I made the mistake myself. I'm like, I don't understand why people don't get this. The sign right out front says so.
Yeah.
But I had a park president once tell me at SeaWorld, this is SeaWorld, not Sign World, right? So a sign isn't necessarily the answer for everything. And I remember somebody telling me, you don't go to the bank to your business and there's not a sign there that says do not rob, right? You don't need a sign for everything. So, but to your point, Matt, I think it takes a lot of effort to go and say, do I really understand? Or better yet, I like to ask friends and family, take a look at this. Does this make sense to you? And those are so critical. Again, people are so focused and working really hard. I have a saying around here at the farm about we need to work smarter, not harder. Everybody's working really hard, especially in this post, coming out of COVID and labor shortages and staffing. We have to get creative and find new ways to be more efficient and better serve our guests. And just because we have less staff doesn't mean we can just throw up our arms and say, oh, well. So looking at it from the guest perspective is number one for me.
Are there any examples you can share of being more efficient with less, or working smarter in addition or instead of working harder?
Yeah, I think it's in some cases it's using technology. So can we deploy additional people? Instead of one person working a line, checking somebody in, can we get another device and have somebody check in two at a time, or walk down the line? Don't wait for the line to get to you. Just those things where, again, you got to be focused on the process and making sure we're serving our guests.
And I would imagine part of that comes from just the operational awareness of what's going to get people through faster. Like if you use that example, I remember working at Valley Fair up in Minnesota, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 lanes of incoming car traffic. And I would just stand out there literally directing traffic to the right booth, so that, because for whatever reason, all the guests wanted to go to the line where all the cars were already. Well, this must be the open one, right? Well, no, that one over there was
the best one.
Don't have any. So from your operational background, how do you instill that kind of operational know-how, or is it kind of just based on experience?
No, I think, listen, I roll up my sleeves. Last weekend, I was out in the parking lot, just, talking to the staff and talking to the team, and, showing them that if you go down the line of cars and encourage, at least a few people to get in the other lane, people will follow. So to me, it's about leading by example. I've never asked anybody to do anything I either haven't done or not willing to do myself. And so I think that's a big part of it, is just being hands-on in a positive way, not getting in the way of folks doing their job, but being there to help them and support them.
Yeah.
And then where does it all come into play with leading by example and being there to support them, while also at the same time recognizing their input and their feedback? Because being that they're on the front line, they're doing it every day, they might be coming up with some suggestions that some of them might be good, some of them might not be so great, but in some cases it might be worthwhile to maybe test these ideas to say, yes, we've never done it this way before, or I've seen it done very differently in many other ways, but now that perhaps things are changing, times are shifting a little bit, or the same token of wanting to work smart and be more efficient, how are you able to embrace some of that employee feedback and weave that in from an innovative standpoint?
So one of the things when I was interviewing for this job, Bob Herman, the chairman of the Family Ownership Group, asked me, says, "Do you know what MBWA is?" And I said, "Yes, it's management by walk around." And I think literally that's a lot of it. So not just being out there when it's busy, but being out there maybe when it's slow too, and talking to employees. I was in the courtyard last night. We had a special event and able just to chat to some folks, and they've worked at Grants Farm a lot longer than I have, and they had some great ideas. I'm implementing regular communications meetings here. When I was in Williamsburg, I used to do something called Donuts with Doug, where I'd ask the team to randomly pick a group of frontline people, one Saturday a month, and have them come in early and donuts. And I'd share with plans about what was going on, but I mainly wanted to hear from them about ideas. And I've gotten some great ideas and suggestions from people. I'm creating a mailbox here, askdoug@grantsfarm.com, so employees can feel free anytime that thought comes to their mind. I welcome that kind of stuff, because I think if you get locked in or to thinking the answer, that can be dangerous.
And Doug, I'm sure you've worked with people that didn't have that mindset, right? Of I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm not going to listen to other people. And so what's the damage there? So if people are listening to this and they're saying, yeah, I want to manage by walking around, I want to get people's ideas, but I'm just not comfortable doing that. How could they potentially be damaging themselves or their operation?
Because you don't know what you don't know. And you may be missing an opportunity. And again, something that you assumed maybe was occurring in the operation, or thought was, and come to find out it's not. Or there's no better way than how do we make a job better or a job easier? Ask the person who's doing it, right? And they'll tell you. And it's been great, especially here at the farm. I walk around and we've got some seasonal employees who've been coming back for 15, 20 years. And I ask them, what keeps you coming back? And, how long have you been here and where have you worked? So I think it's just breaking the ice and having that discussion. But you have to work at it, Matt. I mean, it's easier. We're all busy, right? It's easy to get stuck in the office. I got to get my emails done. I got to get this report down. But sometimes you got to be disciplined about putting the pen down and just going out and just walking around. I enjoy too, just talking to guests. Where are you from? When's the last time you came to Grant's Farm? What do you like best about Grant's Farm? What could we do better? And sometimes I think people are a little nervous. Oh gosh, I'm going to get beat up. I know we got this problem over here and people are going to probably beat me up over it. But tell them, at least acknowledge, you know what, we could be better in this area. And I agree with you and we're going to fix it, or this is how we're going to address it. So don't ever shy away from that opportunity.
So as you're implementing the MBWA strategy, management by walking around, you jogged my memory. I first heard that term from Dr. Duncan Dixon many years ago. We've had him on the podcast a few years ago, professor at Rosen College at UCF. After decades of working in large scale theme parks, as you are now walking around and talking to employees and talking to guests, has there been anything that has surprised you or anything that has been unexpected that you've learned either from employees or from guests as you're, I would say, immersing yourself into the environment?
One of the things that surprised me is even through the pandemic, the loyal team member base we have here. Being a seasonal operation where most of the business occurs between Memorial Day and Labor Day, you need seasonal folks. And there is a core group of retired people who are here not because they have to be, but because they want to be. They don't need the job, but they want to be out doing something. They want to be out. They are the most passionate group I've come across. When I first got to Grant's Farm, it hadn't been announced that about the transition and my new position. So I had the ability to kind of just be incognito. And I would go out to the Barnhof courtyard, kind of the main center here, and I couldn't go more than 5 minutes just sitting down by myself before somebody who was cleaning tables or sweeping up trash or would just come by and ask me how I was doing and ask me how my visit was. And they love to talk about Grant's Farm. They love to talk about the Busch family. And that's really special, but I don't take it for granted. And I tell our team here, our job is to make sure we keep them wanting to come back every season, right? I want them back for that 15th or 16th season or that second or third season. And so we've got to make sure we stoke the fire of that passion.
Yeah. Well, and with it, that passion a lot of times brings very high expectations and, continual, feeling of ownership. So kind of how do you balance that? Because you want them to bring the passion. You also know that, sometimes the passion can turn into, maybe less desirable traits if it goes too far the other way. So have you had any of that experience? I probably even before, but maybe not at Grant's Farm.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen what I would call overzealous passion, right? Somebody has such enthusiasm, they hoard their area, right? Or, draw a territory line. And I think it's just by engaging them and asking questions, and just making them feel like they have ownership and input. Perhaps ask them about another area, right? Just say, hey, I know you're an expert in this, but what do you think about, how guests arrive and what could we do better there? So it's about engaging people and keeping them enthused, but not over enthused.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, and this is going a little bit back here when we were talking about how you used to have those weekly meetings with Scott Rose to make sure that there was that regular communication between marketing and operations. So maybe it's a little bit of revisiting that topic here.
Sure.
But you talk about the importance of tearing down those silos and that using the guest feedback to kind of flow between operations and marketing. And I'm wondering if you're able to share a little bit of that, how guest feedback not only impacts operations department, but how that also can be packaged for marketing as well to be able to help, whether it's through advertising or whether it's through just the way that the experience is communicated to help tear down the silo and create more of a bridge there.
Yeah, I think really to your point, Josh, that guest feedback was kind of the common bond, right? We could right? Because the guests will let us know operationally when we're messing something up and when we're doing something good. And the same side on the marketing and advertising, if they're confused or don't understand it, or if it's a great promotion, obviously we'll see it through attendance. But Scott Rose, I have tremendous amount of respect for, because at the time, not a lot of marketing or advertising people were necessarily interested in hearing what the ops guys and gals had to say, and Scott was. And when he realized we were, better together than alone, when we both did, I think that was a success. And the guest feedback, good, bad, indifferent, is that common thread we used.
Yeah. I want to go back also just a little bit, because you had talked a little bit about your long time volunteering with IAPA, and so much of my relationships. I mean, Doug, you and I met through IAPA. Josh and I have IAPA history. It seems like that is one of the common denominators of so much networking and relationship building throughout the industry. So can you talk a little bit about how important that has been to your career and even your personal and professional development, being involved with IAPA?
Instrumental. So I've been very fortunate to really travel the world. I've been in FECs and theme parks and attractions and museums on just about every continent except Antarctica. And again, what strikes me is how common we all are, and how much people are willing to help each other. And just the fact that, going to an FEC chain in Indonesia and, oh, somebody from SeaWorld's here, that's great. But I probably took away as much from them as I tried to help and share with them. So I've learned an awful lot, met an amazing group of friends that are still friends today over the decades I've been doing this and traveling the world. And that's really what's rewarding. And it also having that network, because when you come across the problem you're having in your attraction, you're probably not unique. The circumstances may be unique, but the type of problem you're having probably isn't unique. And to have a network of somebody you can call or reach out to and say, hey, I'm having this challenge or that, and people are more than willing to offer their solution or their 2 cents. It's just amazing about this industry. We're competitors, but we're not competitors. We're all in it together.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a timely message or a timely conversation for those who are watching or listening to this right when this comes out. It's the week prior to the 2021 IAPA Expo, which I'm so excited to get back to seeing everyone in real life and just seeing that trade show floor again, and honestly smelling the carpet. It has that just unique smell to it. You're at an IAPA Expo. For someone who might be about to go attend an IAPA for the very first time, and I know that there's, I'm sure, a number of people out there who are listening to that. What are some of your top tips for making the best out of the show?
Have a plan. Look on the website, look at don't forget about the educational sessions. A lot of people think IAPA and think trade show, and that's great. And I've saw a lot of great products and such, but don't forget about the educational program that comes with it, but have a game plan. If you're able to go with more than just yourself from your organization, split up. I know everybody wants to kind of walk the floor together or go to the same sessions, but split up and, meet back together for a beer at the end of the day and share your experiences, because there's just so much to learn and see and do. And don't be afraid to get involved and speak up. Introduce yourself to somebody. Just go to a session, ask questions, participate. I guarantee you won't regret it.
Do you remember your first IAPA, Doug?
I do remember my first IAPA I don't remember the year, Matt, but it was in Los Angeles. The one year it was out in Los Angeles, and I was a manager in San Diego. And we were fortunate, since it was so close to San Diego, more of us got to go drive up. And I remember I was riding the bus back from the trade show to the hotel, and sitting in front of me was an older couple. They could have been my grandparents, and they were in deep discussion. and they were talking about whether they should make this $50,000 investment in this new, I forget if it was a ride or some kind of new attraction. And it just struck me that that's our industry, right? Yes, we love SeaWorld, Disney, Universal, all the big players, but that's the industry. And the fact that those people are there at IAAPA kind of making, major decisions that are going to have impact on themselves and their business it was eye-opening for me.
That's so cool. That's that's a cool story. When I think of like my first IAAPA Expo, I think I remember sort of saying like, oh, this is the business of something
right.
I've been such a big consumer of, and now an employee of, and and professional in that industry. And it's really cool to just see that come together and see that kind of those two things align, I would say. Going back maybe around to that time frame or early on in your career, if you could give career advice to yourself back when you had first started working at SeaWorld San Diego, what would you tell yourself?
Have confidence in myself and my abilities. I remember when I graduated college and I was a supervisor and I went to San Antonio to help open the park, and I was put in charge of hiring. I needed to staff up ops, so I needed to hire and train 800 people in the next 3 months. And I'd never interviewed, I'd never hired anybody, never done anything. But I had a director of ops who had more confidence in my abilities than I had at myself at the time. And if he hadn't have been mentoring and encouraging, I probably wouldn't have succeeded. So I'd give myself that advice. And then today I try to turn around and pay it forward. I'm part of the IAAPA mentorship group, kind of help get that off the ground. And I love talking to young people in the industry and just offering them advice on how to grow and expand, because this is an amazing industry. You can literally do anything you want to do. If you like to build things, you can do that. If you love entertaining people, you can do that. If you love taking care of animals, the sky's the limit in our industry.
So Doug, what are some of those pieces of advice that you give to the young leaders? Probably, be confident, right, is what you would tell yourself. Right. What was some of that other advice that you give to some of the young leaders that you talk to?
Be open, build your network, right? It's kind of, I kind of equate it to, when we were all young and coming out of college and, your parents or somebody, you need to start saving for retirement. And you're like, oh, there's plenty of time for that. And it's kind of the same thing here. You need to start building your network. And if you don't approach it as that, it's really about building friendships and connections. I mean, to this day, I've been going to IAAPA off and on for over 30 years. There are still people that I see once a year, and that's at IAAPA, but I value and cherish that opportunity and time to see them. And like I said, you develop connections that will last a lifetime.
I heard a saying once that said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. So I think that's
absolutely,
that's really good as far as building your network and and all the things there. One of the things that you did mention is that you have participated in the mentor-mentee program, and so I think that's actually just kind of a quick plug or promotion for that. I'm on the IAAPA Young Professionals Committee and I've kind of been part of that task force. So first of all, thank you for doing that, and for those out there, if you are interested on either end of that, if you've been in the industry for at least 5 years and looking to help others grow within the industry, we're looking for mentors. And for those who are 35 and younger and looking to develop, we're looking for mentees as well. So definitely make sure to check that out. But Doug, as we start to wind this down, if people want to learn more about you or get a hold of you directly, or if they want to learn more about Grants Farm, where would you send them?
So absolutely, go to grantsfarm.com to learn about Grants Farm. You can look me up on LinkedIn at Doug Stagner on LinkedIn. And I can also be reached at doug.stagner@grantsfarm.com, and would love to hear from people.
Excellent. We will put all of that in the show notes so that people can see that. And Doug, this has been a wonderful conversation. So great to catch up and hear some highlights from your career and some of your advice. So thank you again for your time. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release, and even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.